So your immune system has basically, if you think of it as an army, so you have like all the different squads, and then you have that group of people that are called the messengers, right? And they'll go and alert everybody, guys, get ready, we need to fight this infection. So cortisol would inhibit those cytokines from working. So what happens if you're really sick and stressed? You get sicker. Next one is damaging neuron in your hippocampus. Hippocampus is the site of memory. So when you're studying, it's there where you have, all this all the thinking process going on. You make new synapses. When you're studying, if you're stressed, this process is inhibited. I think it's minus 75% retention rate when you're studying while stressed. So don't study when you're stressed. Next one, decreased thyroid function. So thyroid is basically one of the things in your body that helps you burn down fat. So if you release a lot of cortisol, it will just inhibit that from working, and you have fat accumulating around your tummy, right? And this will increase your chances of heart diseases, but also this will just prevent you from going to the beach. Next one on the list is adrenaline. So what does adrenaline do? It's linked to tumor growth. Very scary stuff. So they took mice at the University of Texas, and they injected in them tumor cancer cells, right? So they stressed the mice. My advisor suggested that they put cats around them. I don't know how they stressed it, but they probably did that. Starved them, stressed them really high so that they could release a lot of adrenaline. And then studied how their tumor were spreading compared to the other mice. It spread 7 times faster and grew 7 times bigger, which is mind-blowing. And then it makes platelets sticky. So platelets are things in your blood. They're like, you have red blood cells, and you have white blood cells, and you have those little things, they look like dots if you look at them from a picture, and they're called platelets. It makes them sticky. So it makes your blood more viscous. So imagine if your blood was supposed to flow normally, it will just flow harder, right? Because it's just that more gluey. Next one, vasopressin or ADH. ADH is a friendly hormone. It's actually necessary because it helps your kidneys to retain water. When you're thirsty, in case of drought or stress, you retain a lot of water. What it does is also increases your blood, like your blood pressure by increasing your heartbeat. So now imagine if your heart keeps on being asked to beat fast, it will worn out. Imagine of it like an elastic band, your heart and your veins, right? If you keep on pulling it every time, what happens? It gets loose and it starts cracking. Okay, so that's the same thing that happens in your body. So your heart, and it develops something called hypertrophy, which happens during hypertension. It's like one part of your heart gets bigger, so the other part stays smaller, so your heartbeat becomes irregular. So it doesn't beat normally. You're not even doing the fractals anymore thing, and your risk of dying of a heart attack is just that much bigger. Same thing for your veins; they start cracking, and then you have white blood cells. Your army guys come to fix it; they can't do it. Then you have things like bad cholesterol coming to clot there. Then you have foam cells, and it's like a big mix of things in your blood vessels. That's called a plaque, atherosclerosis, and it's just there. And because your blood is more viscous, as we noticed, the blood just doesn't want to pass. And if it happens in your legs, maybe it will, cause some pain. Sometimes you won't even notice it. But if it happens in your heart, dead. One last thing. This is not related to hormones because they haven't really studied what exactly causes this. But they studied the telomere shortening response to stress. So don't worry, I'm going to explain it. So telomeres are things in your cells that gives your chromosome structure when your cell is replicating. So your cells are constantly splitting to make new cells, right? But a cell doesn't replicate infinitely. It has a certain lifespan. Each time your cell replicates, the telomere gets shorter because something called the DNA polymerase somehow fails to replicate the entire length of the telomere. So if you study the length of a telomere, you can tell the age of a cell, right? They've noticed that for these mothers that were breastfeeding a chronically ill children, so that means they were chronically ill themselves, their telomeres just got shorter much quicker. So they cell age much quicker than normal mom. Want to grow old fast? So what? How does this apply to Africans, and are there any encouraging factors? I mean, we all know that there's this, popular belief that Africa, Hakuna Matata, we're stress-free, we're not. Sorry to burst your bubble, but the study is really relevant because in 2004, they studied 2,041 boys and girls from Cape Town and Nairobi. And they studied one of the highest forms of stress you can ever think of, which is post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. And what they found out was scary. So you could see her. Oops, sorry. The mean age was around 16, okay? Then lots of different ethnicities represented. Then you have here the relevance of the study, which is, if it's less than 0.05, it's relevant. So if it's even less than that, so it's even more relevant, type thing. And most of them showed either full or partial symptoms of PTSD and depression. So just to give you meaning to the numbers, 85% of these kids had was tested positive to at least one of the tested criteria, and most of them experienced either full or partial symptoms for PTSD and depression. So do not be fooled, guys. People do get stressed on the continent. Now, maybe there's something different in the way we portray stress and deal with it in terms of community, okay? So the fact that we as Africans have a natural tendency to overcome stress, I mean, if it's true, then there's something that we need to teach to the world about us, right? And if it's not, there's something we need to learn to do better. So coping mechanisms. This is the thing we do differently. Each culture does differently. So I'm going to approach abnormality with the cognitive behavioral model of psychology. Yeah, Mr. Rogers, I know you have it. So basically what the cognitive behavioral model says is that we all have different views of the world which affect the way we interact with it. So things like stress is our inability, and depression is our inability to cope with all those different things we see, okay? So different cultures will do this differently. We'll try to fix this problem. So if I'm abnormal in my, whatever culture I'm from in Senegal, and someone is abnormal in whatever culture they come from in Zambia, our environment will try to fix that differently, and we will try to fix that ourselves differently, right? So concepts such as Ubuntu or Muny in Senegal and Gambia, are a way of dealing with stress. So I'm going to talk about Muny because it's the one I'm the most familiar with. And to do that, I'm going to ask any Senegalese person to give me their own definition of the thing. What do you guys think? If there's any Senegalese person. Oh, come on, guys. Yes, Dudu. Okay, suck it up sometimes. Anyone else? Keep it for yourself. Okay, so this idea of discretion and suffering, okay? It's like the closest you can get to it, but there's many dimensions to the actual word and the way people portray it. So basically, how the culture in Senegal would look at stress, chronic stress means weakness of a person. And because the person is not isolated from their environment, that means the environment of the person is weak in not trying to help the person to fix it or failing to fix the person. So if you are stressed chronically, you wouldn't want to go around and say, oh, I'm stressed, hey. Because people are going to be like, chill, man, it's her family. They're all messed up. They're not helping her. And you don't want people to say that about your family because, trust me, you're going to regret it if your mom touch you. So this has been somehow effective at reducing levels of chronic stress. But that's my own interpretation of it. So maybe because I don't see people talking about stress and In fact, I didn't know about stress until I got to this place. And everybody's like, you're gonna get stressed, okay? And you need to know how to deal with it. Yeah, now I get stressed and I know it, but before I didn't. And I guess that helped me. But that's my own analysis. And it should be a reason why we study, whether it's wrong or right, it should be a reason why we should study these things in Africa, right? Because at this point, I believe that, you know, it's unacceptable that indigenous culture have not yet given a formal contribution to modern psychology. There's so many of them. It's the majority of people in the entire planet. But we still do not have our voice in these types of discussions. And that is my final word. Any question? Yes, Cecily?
So what I understood from your presentation that there are some hormones that get released, such as the cortisol and stuff, right? So the expression releasing stress is actually false, right? So when people say I'm releasing stress, is it that they're producing hormones that counteract the effect of cortisol and stuff? Or is it that they're, like, is the expression releasing stress scientifically sound?
But I guess in terms of, you know, relaxing, practicing, you know, trying to get your heartbeat low and stuff, you sort of releasing stress. But instead of the way your hormone interact, it's not really right. Because, okay, so if you see a stressor, right, and you get into that matrix and you're really stressed, but then you sort of have a discussion with yourself and you're like, okay, I'm going to calm down right now and I'm going to be positive, right? Positive thinking will trigger something else, a different response with different hormones in your brain, such as dopamine and which will make you more motivated, for example. So maybe in that case, yeah, it's not that right. Yes, Shayla?
Would you say stress has more to do with hormones or the way you think? Because, I mean, when you were at home, you never really cared what you say, and then when you come to it, oh my god, yes, I'm going to get stressed, and you get all these feelings. Is it more the way you think or is it hormones?
Yeah, so now this is where I got confused because my last presentation, I was scared that maybe talking to you about stress will get you stressed, but there's a difference, right? Talking to you about stress will make you stressed about being stressed, but there's a difference because there's something with being aware that you're stressed and actually having the biological response anyway. So if you enter a test, no matter whether you call it stress or whatever, and you get really freaked out, the response you're gonna have is the stress response, whether you label it as that or not. But now in terms of chronic stress, people deal with it differently and they experience it differently. You know what I mean? So you can't really, this is where you have like the conscious mechanisms happening. It's like a conscious effort of not getting stressed or not being panicked, whichever word you give it to describe it. But the biological response is there and the hormones are still being released.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm glad we had that last question and answer because I was a little worried now going into CAE exams. Not only would you be stressed about the exam, but you'd be stressed about getting stressed about the exam. So, Linda, thank you for resolving that one for us. Great job.